Tonight on EWTN Live, we'll look at the relationship between the world of psychology and the Catholic faith. So please stay with us. Thank you. Thank you very much and welcome. I'm Father Mitch Pacwa and welcome to EWTN Live, our chance to bring you guests from all over the world. Before we go to our guests, just want to remind you today is Ash Wednesday. Didn't have to put as much makeup on because of the ashes this time. The importance of this feast is that we begin Lent in the Roman Rite. The Eastern rites began on Monday. The Western Rite begins on Wednesday. And with this, we begin 40 days of fast and abstinence. Let's really try to keep this a great Ash Wednesday and a great Lent so that it really be a blessing and a preparation for celebrating the great feast of Easter. And I know a lot of people, I always like to bring this up, a lot of people will say, I don't want to give stuff up for Lent, I want to do something positive. Well, you don't have to make that choice. You can do both. You can give up stuff. That's a good thing to do to remind you what you don't really need. And you can also do positive things with the money that you save by giving stuff up and help out the poor and do a variety of other good deeds. So that's a great thing to do on this feast of Ash Wednesday. Also, I could also mention that today would have been the feast of St. Francis of Rome. She was born in 1384 and died in 1440. She wanted to be a nun, but her parents arranged a marriage and married her off. And she married a soldier with the Roman army. And it's very interesting that they really had a successful marriage, that even though it was an arranged marriage, they fell in love and had a very successful marriage. The one biographer said that partly that was due to the fact that he was off at the wars all the time. But I don't know that was true. But they did lose a child to the plague. And this gave St. Francis a sensitivity to care for the sick. So with her husband's permission, and then later on after he died, she opened up hospitals for the sick and for the poor sick especially. And she started an order of nuns to help care for those who are poor and sick. And when her husband died, she became the superior of that community, and they still exist doing good for those who are poor and in ill health. All right, tonight our guest is a clinical psychologist and the co-creator of the DVD series, What Catholics Really Believe. Got a copy of it right here. And he's here to help us understand some of the links and disconnects between the Catholic faith and modern psychology. So please welcome Dr. Ray Guarendi.
Hi, Father Mitch. How are you?
Dr. Ray, how the heaven are you?
I know you wouldn't say this.
Yes.
But do these folks know how many languages you are fluent in?
Oh, they don't need to know too much about all that.
I know, but okay, I got to say it. This doesn't count as bragging if you don't say it. The man knows 12 languages.
Well,
12!
It's easy. No wife, no kids, no money, lots of time.
12 languages. My kids don't know one language.
Well, it's just something that you do along the way. It's like, for me, it's like tools in a kit. I've studying scripture and theology, just needed to know these languages, so just got to learn them.
Incredible. That's incredible.
Just
You just keep gathering them up, don't you?
Well, I still work on them.
Gee, God bless you.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
I
had to say, I don't know anybody that knows 12 languages.
Well, we'll have to get you around. There are plenty of folks out there who do, especially in scripture scholarship. You kind of need to know other languages.
You know what you've done?
What's that?
You have destroyed my respect for those pikers that only know 5 or 6. I'm not impressed with them anymore.
Well, they're doing great work, that's for sure. But speaking of great work, so are you. And the work that you're doing, in terms of psychology and the faith is a very important one. But I want to give our folks a little bit of background, that psychology and Christianity has had a very rough relationship. Sigmund Freud was very anti-religious, and he saw religion as the psychological problem that needed to be eradicated, and that he would take the place of priests hearing confessions. Now, not all psychologists saw that. Carl Jung had a more positive attitude toward religion. Not that he was a Christian, he was a Gnostic himself.
More tolerant.
Yeah, but he had a respect for religion, and he even said that less than 2% of his patients were Catholics because they took care of their problems in the confessional. So he was more tolerant and more open-minded. But there's been this tension between psychology and Christianity and Catholicism in particular. How do you manage as a psychologist and who's living a Catholic faith?
When I was in grad school, one of the overwhelming themes was no values in therapy. You are morally neutral. And that's how I had to study. And I remember thinking, how is that possible?
Exactly.
To be morally neutral is a value. So that was my first crisis, right then and there. Raised Catholic, thinking, well, obviously, if God exists, His way is the best way. He's smarter than we are. Even my PhD profs, God is probably smarter than. So if He says, do it this way, don't do it this way. He must know what He's talking about. So that was my second crisis. I'm being told by my training, oh, don't get into this moral stuff. The problem you run into, Father, is almost everybody who walks into that office has moral struggles.
Exactly.
They won't label it that, but they do. And all it takes is one little question. If you say something like, are you a religious person? Floodgates open up. You get everything from, oh, I'm so glad you asked that, to, I'd like to be, but I really don't know what that means. But it's there for almost everyone. It is there in some form, either in a germ or fully manifest. Here's the tricky part. There is a veneer of consistency between psychology and religion. I mean, think about it, Father. Psychology, tolerance, understanding, healing and empathy. I mean, come on, that's Christian stuff. The problem is it's a superficial relationship because psychology basically looks at the world with a whole different set of rules.
How so? Tell us about that.
One of the most dominating things psychology has done lately, the self-image movement. Yes. This thing exploded on the scene in the 70s. The theory was, kids in particular, we need to foster healthy self-esteem, and from self-esteem will flow all other things that are good. And I remember thinking, I wonder if Jesus went to the apostles and said, excuse me, Simon, now I was going to change your name to Peter, but I didn't want to mess with your self-image. Okay, you've already solidified your self-image. I don't want to go changing names as an adult. Now, the reason I picked you to head this church is your self-esteem. I like that in my boys. If you can conceive it, you can believe it. If you can believe it, you can achieve it. Peter, 12 more weeks of Tony Robbins management courses, and I'm going to put you in charge of this operation. I just can't fathom it, Father.
No, I don't think so.
There is an exercise that I sometimes give folks. I'll say, okay, I want you to do a little test. You go to the computer, you type in child, self-esteem, search. Hundreds of thousands of options. Type in child, humility, search. right there, the experts do not foster something like humility as a virtue one should chase.
So you don't see child humility?
You don't. Unless there's a very select group of morally traditional mental health people who focus on humility, you will not find it among general psychological principles. You won't find it. But yet for Christians, that's the very core of who we are. I'm very proud of my humility.
As well you should be.
It's something I've got down pat, I think.
You know, as a matter of fact, this is one of the things that would be a major difference between a value-free psychology approach to Catholicism that talks about 7, vices and 7 virtues.
Vices, Father, that's value judgment, Father.
Yes, it is. And I ain't scared of it.
Just say it in another language. They won't know what you're talking about.
Exactly. But, pride being, probably the worst of the 7 capital sins.
Are you familiar at all with the language used now, especially in educational settings, that I call morally antisepticized?
No.
If you're talking to a child in a proper way to talk to a child, an enlightened way to now talk to a child, excuse me, that behavior is inappropriate. Unacceptable choices. Do you see what we've done? No bad, no wrong, no right, no good. Unacceptable, inappropriate, because we have whitewashed morality out of the language. Even among Christians, I see them do this. In CCD classes or in Bible studies. You see the teacher going, Sticker, that's a very appropriate behavior, Butkus. Tell him, no, that's a good behavior. That's a moral behavior. No, it's appropriate. I always tease my clients. I say, Johnny, I'm not comfortable with the ice pick in your sister's arm. Inappropriate choices. Take 2 stickers off your system. Do you know what else psychology does? And I got this heavy when I was in grad school. Focus on the positive. Ignore the negative. So if a kid's throwing a major league fit, or if somebody is verbally upbraiding another person, focus on the positive. Wait for the chance to give them a compliment and to affirm when they're using good language. Of course, they would never say good language, appropriate language. The idea that you point out negative, I was taught punishment doesn't work. Negative simply pushes people away. And to basically what we would call hold somebody accountable for their behavior would be viewed as kind of a Neanderthal throwback to a time when we were much less enlightened. It pervades, Father. It's like a seeping sap. It just kind of pervades the way we think.
This is one area that really has changed. As you said, in the 1970s, there were Freudianism was pretty much rejected because some experiments had shown that it really didn't help in therapy.
Yes.
And so in the 70s, there began to be, from my perspective as an outsider to psychology, it looked like they were searching for mental health sometimes in all the wrong places. But there was the scramble to search for new therapies and new definitions of mental health. And I'm not so sure that it's settled down yet. That's been my impression.
It hasn't, Father. What you saw was the momentum of the 70s was value neutral. Rogerian therapy, where you don't make judgments. If the client says, I just feel like punching my mother in the face. Well, a good therapist might say, so you're feeling frustrated about your mother? Right. Yes, I'd like to push her downstairs. I'm sensing a lot of bad feelings. Go with that. Share with me what those are. There's that avoidance, that diligent avoidance of, you want to push your mother down the steps? that strike you as hurtful? See, that would be far too directive.
Right.
That would be...
according to the Rogerian
absolutely.
school.
And that dominated for a long time.
Right.
It's still there. I mean, now it's kind of a pick and choose, but there still is... I remember when I sat in grad school one time, I was in a class that basically said, you got to get to the point where you trust people. And we're going to do exercises to make you trust people. So, we're going to turn all the lights off. We're going to have you put your hands down at your side. We're going to have you walk around in class bumping into people so that you can get in touch with invading the space. Well, I don't know. I was wondering, did I shower? I was bumping into people all over the place. And after I was done, I thought, okay, now, what did I get out of that?
Exactly.
You'll love this. I was sitting in class one time, and the prof said this. Well, the way you take in information is similar to the way you eat. If you chew your food, that means you're a very critical thinker, and you take your information in and grind it up. So I went, is there any research support for this? He said, now Father, this tells you where we were at. Ray, I noticed that you're leaning back. Are you unsure of your question? So I went, is there any research support for this tie-in? Tell me, Ray, right now, the way your leg is crossed, there's a certain sense of closure here where I'm not... He wouldn't answer my question. Because
he's trying to analyze you and your body language.
Every move. I wanted to go, what does this say? Yeah, it was very frustrating. And I was educated kind of as an engineer. You know, an engineer, there are certain realities. And if you ignore them, the bridge falls down.
Exactly.
You know, so I had a hard time in psychology with this, well, we all just kind of think the way we think. And what we have to do is make no judgments about what is a better way to think, what is a poorer way to think. We have to accept and affirm Father that if He says that He thinks that it's okay to slap somebody upside the face, then we have to explore why He thinks that.
Now, this does not sound to me as if you've taken up these approaches of psychology very much. How does your faith have an impact on what you do?
If there's a God, then He's a lot smarter than I am. And if God says, here is morality, to the degree that you break this law, it's like gravity. You can stay up in the air in a plane for a while, but eventually gravity wins. You can jump off a 30,000-foot something down into a chasm in a cavern in the middle of the earth, and you won't hit for quite a while. You're going down hard, but so far so good. But eventually gravity wins. Eventually the moral law wins. People will walk into my office, Father, and whether they're religious or not, they'll describe their lives. Shambles. Shambles. They've alienated their spouse. 2 of their kids aren't talking to them. They have lost a job because they struggle with authority. Whether they understand it or not, the degree they deviate from the way God says to do it, the more mess they make. They don't put those two together. So somebody will say to me one time, okay, you'll appreciate this. Long ago I did a book called Back to the Family. The premise of the book was this: how do really good families raise really good kids? We went around all 50 states, talked to the folks. A number one theme to emerge from the book was religious faith. Over and over and over again, the family said, our faith is at the center of our success. Now, the first publisher rejected the book. She didn't like that. She didn't like the message. The message was, well, you don't have to have religion to raise a good family. So I got a question from an interviewer once. She said, "Are you telling me that you need religious faith to raise good kids?" I said, No. No, a lot of people who aren't religious that raise pretty decent human beings. I said, but the question is, how do they make the judgment? If the kid comes to them at 16 and says, "Hey, Ma, I don't agree with what you're telling me about sex. I love my girlfriend, and I think we can be together." And she says, "Oh, don't do that. Why not?" Well, it's wrong." Who says it's wrong? Well, it is. "Well, Mom, that's what you say."
Well, you're not mature enough.
I don't agree with you. Well, yeah, but that's just your opinion, Mom. So it's a mature opinion. Mine's an immature opinion. Both opinions. There's no plumb line. How do you defend? If I can say the God of the universe says, do it this way, don't do it this way, that's a lot more leverage in trying to teach somebody than, well, I've kind of stumbled upon some moral precepts in my life, and I kind of want to tell you which ones I think are the decent ones. The natural rebelliousness in the human being is going to go, why should I buy yours? I think psychology did that. Psychology said, look, a lot of what you guys did about religion, you priest types and everything, okay, that was okay for a more primitive time. But we have become enlightened, especially in the last 50 years. The 50 years of our enlightenment dwarfs the thousands of years of human wisdom.
Just pass over that Nazi episode.
Yeah.
Communism.
Come on.
Concentration camps. Pass over that. We've matured.
Don't make judgments.
Yes, I'm so sorry.
But it's interesting, Father. Scarily so, more and more professors will tell you they're shocked when they ask their students, was 9/11 wrong? Recently, a college prof said, I asked my students, and they said, well, it was wrong, but it wasn't morally wrong. He said, what does that mean? He said, well, I don't know. In their eyes, it was justified. So I don't know if we have the right to say that was wrong.
Exactly. This has been the experience of professors dealing with Nazi Germany, communist gulag, and so many other human atrocities that kids will say, well, I think it's wrong, and I wouldn't do it, but maybe they thought it was okay.
Yikes.
So it's all right for them.
Yikes.
I know it.
Yikes. And the interesting thing is, it isn't just immoral. It's illogical. If something is immoral, it's dumb. You can't defend it logically. You try to defend it logically. Okay, well, that's okay for them. It's not okay for me. So what if they want to take a ball bat to your knees? Is that okay for them? Well, no, because it would infringe upon my rights. But wait a minute. That's what they wish to do. And that's their choice. You may not prefer it, but how do you say it's not? By your own system. How do you say it's not? Yeah, had I not found some amalgamation, I think a healthy one between psychology and Catholic faith, I'd be selling T-shirts on Maui. I couldn't live with the tension.
Right.
I could not. And there's a lot more areas too, Father, that we can talk about.
Like what would be some examples?
For the longest time, there was a theory that said, and most of the psychological world bought into this theory, emanated from Freud. Emotions need to be vented.
You got to let your feelings out.
Let it out. Catharsis. You're a tea kettle. If you hold it in, you're going to get a tumor. You got to let it out. Okay, that was the theory. You got Christianity over here going, well, no, wait a minute. There's a huge difference between kind of talking about your feelings and venting them. Venting them does damage. Venting them hurts people. Venting is a nasty thing. Well, psychology is the voice in the wilderness, or religion is the voice in the wilderness, or their psychology knows that's venting. All the better research that has come out now says those people who vent, by and large, are not only more miserable human beings, but they tend to vent even more. It becomes their habit, their style, like water running down channels. It just runs faster and faster every time it runs. They said, furthermore, it does damage to the body. Venting basically goes after the vulnerable systems of the body with stress. I remember a study I read. It was such a classic. They concluded, they said, perhaps it would be better sometimes to just turn the other cheek. And I looked at this, I'm thinking, this is a secular
I know where that's from.
Yeah. It's like, I heard, somebody made that up. Yes. Because all of psychology would say, that's not healthy. You don't turn the other cheek. You will just build up resentment. You will be consumed with animosity if you do that. I've got to let you know, Father, what you did to me was not very nice. And you need to understand. So, I feel better now. I just ripped on a Jesuit priest. Is that like an excommunication offense?
No, but the Jesuit priest might get you.
you give me one of these. I'm sensing a lot of aggression.
Well, let's just say that venting is mutual.
You're big. You're a lot bigger than me. It's an interesting thing. I get an awful lot of folks in my office who really have not pondered religion. They're there because they know something's not working right. That's why they're there. They're in crisis. It's typically the way people do it. They hit a crisis point. They go, I don't know what else to do. Call a therapist. Okay? When they come in, if the crisis drops below the trip switch, they generally don't come back. I'm down below my crisis point. I can live like this. This is uncomfortable. I can still live like this. But some of them search and say, why am I miserable? What is it about the way I think, the way I look at the world, the way I interact with people? And they want to know. And I cannot tell you how many folks have said to me, I am so glad that I'm going to a therapist who can talk about religion. Because almost without exception, unless they go to a distinctly pastoral counselor, that's not going to be a main
right. No, that's one of the things that I oftentimes hear. This is a dimension of the human person that is very important to include. That is religion is an important dimension of the person that's included in everything that goes on with a person's psyche, so that the psychological and the spiritual and the physical need integration, and that's one of the things that we would look for. I have to take a break. But we're going to come back in a couple of minutes. We want to get some of your questions and some of your comments, so please stay with us. Welcome back. We have a nice audience of folks in different parts of the country, and we'd love to have you come and join us. If you can make a chance to come down here to Birmingham, Alabama, we'd love to have you in our studio audiences, as well as join us at Mass. And you get free tours of the studios and visit around here. We'd just really enjoy having you here. If you're able to do so, please contact our pilgrimage department at 205-271-2966. That's 205-271-2966. Or go to our website, www.ewtn.com. Also, speaking of pilgrimages, I'm planning to lead a pilgrimage to Catholic France. That'll be October 3rd to the 14th. If you're able to join us for those dates, please contact 1-800-554-4556. That's 1-800-554-4556, or go to my website, fathermitchpacwa.org. We're going to be going to Lisieux and Ars and Nevers to see where St. Bernadette was buried, and a number of other places, as well as, of course, the site where the Sacred Heart was revealed at Paris Le Monial. So please join us, and we'll hopefully see you in France. And I can't help but mention a really nice couple brought me this cup, as well as some coffee from the Mystic Monks. And you probably remember they've been on the show before. They sent me some coffee in this cup. They are really good, and the coffee is great. I love supporting mysticmonkscoffee.com because they very much are doing good work. They're supported by the sale of their coffee, and it's better than some of the coffee places that are promoting abortion and other things. So I want to thank the brothers at mysticmonkscoffee.com for their great gift. Also, before going to our studio questions, I want to remind you that the National Catholic Register has always worked hard to bring you the most accurate and up-to-date news from around the world and within the Catholic Church. And now that they are part of the EWTN family, they are stronger than ever and continue to bring you the news you need most. So please feel free to subscribe by going to EWTN.com. Click on National Catholic Register banner, and you'll be able to subscribe to this very good Catholic newspaper. Matter of fact, we have some of the staff from the National Catholic Register who are joining our EWTN family right here in our studio audience tonight. So it's great to have them here with us. Are you ready for some questions?
Could you ask the people to make them true false? I'm better at those.
No. You'll
Had a 50-50 chance.
I know, but we're going to get some real answers out of you. And we're going to start off with a lady named Jennifer. Hello, Jennifer.
Hello, Father Mitch.
Hi, where are you from?
I'm from Florida.
Great. And what is your question?
Father, I'm a college student, and I've been seeing a counselor about some problems from my childhood and my past that's affecting my schoolwork. But I also have a spiritual director and confessor. I was just wondering, what is the difference between what I share with my counselor and my spiritual director, and if I should stop seeing my school counselor and just rely on the Lord and what my spiritual director has to say? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer, for calling.
By and large, they're going to come from different perspectives. Spiritual director will probably tap into where this young lady is more. Now, if there are problems that the spiritual director says, hey, this is emotional stuff, kind of a little beyond my bailiwick here.
Right.
Then at that point, yes. But the difference here, there's a couple of differences. One, the counselor really can't share with anybody what this young lady says, and the counselor can't even tell anybody that this young lady is coming to him or her. That's the first thing. I don't know, Father, what the conditions surrounding spiritual direction are.
Pretty much the same.
Pretty much the same thing?
Pretty much the same. I mean, you can mention that you're giving spiritual direction, but, what the content of the spiritual direction is, private. It would be like the
confidential.
Very confidential.
I tell clients like this young lady, if you are unsettled with the way your counselor is approaching the deepest aspects of who you are, your faith, your morality, your belief in God, then you can do one of two things. You can say to the counselor, can you refer me to somebody else who's more able, comfortable, and willing to deal with these kinds of issues? Or maybe I will just head towards spiritual direction and see if, in fact, my spiritual director says, look, now you need to explore other ways. People will come to me and say, well, are you a Catholic counselor? I say, no. What are you? Psychologist. Well, I thought you were Catholic. Well, I am. But what if somebody comes to you and doesn't want a Catholic worldview? I say, well, I get a lot of that. What do you do? Well, I will still be able to help them deal with life. You know, there's a certain moral law that if you don't label it Catholic, it's God's way of doing things, and it works. And most therapists, whether they label it that or not, follow that.
Yes.
And most of them are going to say, even
including Carl Rogers.
Absolutely. Even the most atheistic therapist is going to say you shouldn't leave your wife and kids under certain circumstances. Anyway,
Right.
Of course, if you're unhappy, then that trumps all. But for me, if somebody comes to me and says, I came to you distinctly because you're a therapist who is Catholic, I'll say, that's fine. I have no problems interweaving the two. But if they come to me and say, look, I don't have any religion, and I really don't want any religion, I said, okay, all right. But it's interesting, Father, even in the most inveterate cases like that, you find out that's not exactly true. They don't want religion as they are afraid of it.
Right. Yeah, they're not ready to start going to church and
Yes,
the
religious stuff.
Yeah, religious stuff. Fear of hell, going to heaven, all that kind of stuff. That's what they're afraid of. Yeah, I'm well aware of that. Of course, I help scare them, but that's another problem. We have a question from our studio audience. Young lady, where are you from?
I'm from Cheshire, Connecticut.
As a matter of fact, you're on the staff of the National Catholic Register.
Yes.
Great,
Yes.
Good to have you here with us. And
Happy
what
to
is
be
your question?
Similar to what you were talking about, I'm wondering if you could talk more about, you were saying that some of your clients are happy that they can talk to somebody about religion, but I was wondering if you could talk about the other side of things. Is anyone hostile towards you and how you handle that?
I have had people storm out of the office, not come back. For religious reasons, not usually. Usually because they didn't want to hear what I said, no matter how delicately I said it. You get a sense of how hard you can tread on certain turf. And some people, you got to take your shoes off, and you got to put oil on the bottom of your feet, and you got to kind of tap in the water like this. I don't get overt hostility very often, not for religious reasons, because I'm not going to go there if they're not open to it.
Right.
I'm not going to push something like that.
Right.
On the other hand, I'm working with a fellow right now who's a very thoughtful guy, very bright guy, and this whole religion thing is a quest for him, but he has enormous questions. Enormous questions. I'm not going to sit there and go like this with him, okay? Because a lot of times folks dig in their heels and go, don't try to push it on me. I will simply ask. Right. Well, then, how did you make that judgment? How do you know that was right? How did you determine that? Just kind of that guiding, shifting sort of, tell me how you're looking at morality. I'm not going to sit here and tell you what morality is. I just want to hear what you're saying, because if you're going to be consistent in morality, you can always bring it back around. The person can go. Sometimes the best insights come from God's moral consistency. If you can say, well, given what you just said, taking your view, wouldn't this follow? And then they go, I never thought of that, kind of thing.
And, it almost sounds as if at times you're willing to use the non-directive approach, that there's a role for the non-directive thing that you mentioned from Rogers, but it's not the be-all, end-all.
It isn't that I will view all morals as equally relative.
Right.
It is, I'm going to ask a lot of questions to make you really look at stuff you haven't looked at. Most people live their lives not looking at who they are and how they make decisions and what matters to them. So when you start pushing like that on them, you got to be careful. Some people get threatened, and other people go, that's great, dive in there. Let me have it. I want to know. All right, so I've had to back off. I've had to just kind of just go like this and wait a little bit. But I would say over 30 years of shrinking, because I used to be like 6'9", I probably had 5 people storm out of the office.
That's not too bad.
That's not bad. That is not, and they were all family members.
Now I understand. Let's go to another call. We have Carmen on the line. Hello, Carmen.
Hi, Father.
Where are you from?
I'm from Puerto Rico.
Great. And what is your question?
My question is, how do we approach the morality issue with the CCD students and the computer competitions?
Great question. Now, you've got a passel of kids. You must have to deal with these things.
The average parent radically underestimates the moral shaping power of the pop culture. One of the saddest things I will see in therapy when a parent walks in with a 16-year-old and says, I don't know who that is. I didn't raise her that way. Sometimes I could say to them, I believe you, but you underestimated what did. First thing I tell parents, you have to have a vigilance on this stuff far beyond anything your great-grandma had to have. You got to be vigilant all over the place. First thing. Secondly, kids don't just accept what we tell them much anymore. Adults don't. If, Father, you were alive 100 years ago, you could have just simply said, well, I'll tell you, you have to go to Mass on Sunday because it's a grievous sin if you don't. And half of the Polish ladies would have gone, hey, that's what Father said, that's the way it is. I don't need any more reason than that. Father said it. You say that to somebody now, they look at you like, why? Is that your rule, Father? Or is it God's? Or is it the church's? No, I'm not sure I buy that. So I think in dealing with kids in CCD, you've got to give them the reason. It isn't just enough to teach them. You teach them that Christ is present in the Eucharist. How? How? I mean, I look at that, it's a white wafer. I don't see the God of the universe there. You teach them how the early church believed it, why they believed it, what the Scripture said about it. Here's why. Many people who teach CCD will say this. If I get too heavy, I'll lose half my class. I can't get them to come. And I'll say, don't sacrifice the substance for the numbers. You're not going to keep them with the cheap stuff anyway. Give them the real stuff, because there will be several kids in there who will want this real stuff, and they will listen. Yeah, okay, so of your class of 28, by the end of the year you got 16. But maybe those 16 are a lot more open to this.
And they might someday be able to evangelize the others that left.
And plus, if you get a priest out of that, you get credit. Yeah. Like your mom, when you baptize babies, she got like 2% credit.
See?
Yeah.
See, that's a good deal. My parents were into that. We have another question from our studio audience. Ma'am, where are you from?
From Birmingham.
Great. Good to have you here. And what's your question?
Another issue these days is bullying. And with teachers not labeling bad or good or doing much discipline, what as parents can we do about bullying?
When a culture pushes God out of the way, it's got to come up with its own sins. Sins now are smoking, spanking, having more than 2.12 children, and bullying. What tends to happen is when a culture defines its own sins, it broadens the sins out. I can no longer smoke in this room. I can't smoke outside now.
Matter of fact, in some places, you're not even allowed to smoke inside your own apartment.
Right. I can't just give my kid a swat on the bottom in love. I can't swat him at all. In bullying, it isn't that I'm knocking this kid down on the ground and taking his lunch money. It's that I looked at him with a disgusted look on my face. So what happens is when you define these sins, they go like this. And the measure of the sin is how it affects me. I don't want you to smoke. Why? Well, because I don't like it. I don't want you to be nasty to a kid. Why? Well, because it affects. So what I would say in bullying, a high percentage, and this is going to get me in all kinds of trouble. High percentage of what we call bullying is not bullying. It's goofy, nasty, wrong conduct. But we call it bullying, and it has a certain valence to it, doesn't it? If you talk bullying rather than Yeah, some kid at school was giving me grief. No, I was bullied. You see the visceral valence there? And that is that relentless cultural, this is a sin. This is a sin. They wouldn't use the word sin, but it's a cultural sin. If you do have a serious bullying thing, and by the way, Father, it is on the increase. And the reason it is because we're not raising as many good kids. When you don't raise morally sound human beings, they're nasty. And when they get nasty, who are they nasty with? Other people. Vulnerable.
Especially, their peers.
Yes.
I really recommend that people reread, if they haven't read already, Lord of the Flies. Where you see that the bullies take over and dominate and destroy.
Natural human proclivity. I tell parents there's a continuum in bullying. Certain percentage of bullying can be ignored, it'll go away. It'll go away. Another percentage, if you keep a lower profile. In other words, the kid on the bus is bugging me. All right, I'm going to sit 6 seats back. I'll put distance between me and him. Maybe he'll be distracted with other things, and a certain percentage of those kids will quit. Some kids, if they hang around other kids, the other kids will say, hey, leave him alone. He didn't do anything to you. There are a small percentage of cases where parents have to intervene. The problem with that is it's delicate. You go to a school official or you go to some authority and say, well, look, here's what's happening. You're counting on the tactical delicacy of that teacher to handle this without making it look like you had your mommy come in and stick up for you and narc on you. Uh-huh. Okay, good. Yeah, that's the ticklish part. But I will tell parents, I say about 5 to 10% of the cases I see, I tell the parent, you're going to have to go in. You're going to have to do something about this with the teacher, low profile, keep an eye on the kid, see if you can catch him in the act.
Do you sense that because this is one of the things that, when you hear it described on in the media, sometimes the cases of bullying get extreme, where there's really a viciousness that's going on. Do you sense that that's the case, or is that just hype from the news?
The media is brilliant at making the extreme the norm. They're not going to focus on some kid that pushed some other kid down. They're going to focus on the kid who comes into class and has 9 pictures drawn with a gun at somebody's head or something like that. Okay, so what they do, wittingly or unwittingly, is now all of a sudden it's all just kind of lumped together. And yes, the kid who pushes down another kid may only be pushing him down, but that's how it starts. So there's this kind of sort of visceral, jarring reaction to anything that smells.
I know it.
Father, when you were a kid, there were jerks all over the place. I can't tell you how many times I was running from somebody because,
right.
It's not cool. They shouldn't have done it, but, or sometimes...
That's life on the playground.
Yeah, I don't know. I turned around and popped a kid in the nose once, and
right.
You just did it. Is that a venial sin or mortal?
Depends.
Oh, man. Besides,
Tell me more.
I don't want to come to you because your penances are rough.
Yes, they are.
You know that? Because you give penances like walk to your knees and in broken glass to the Holy Land and back.
Yes, exactly.
And that's for forgetting to say blessing before meals.
See, wait till I get to the big sins.
The culture has to make up its sins. Like you said, we're going to substitute
As a matter of
something.
fact, one of the things that strikes me is that there's a new Puritanism. It's a secular Puritanism.
Yes. We're very intolerant for certain things.
Exactly. The environment, smoking, a variety of other things. And there are people who would try to influence the society. So, for instance, PETA, that they'd be puritanical about eating any flesh or animal products. And there'd be other groups who would be intolerant about their issues. And that new Puritanism is secular. Mm-hmm. That's the only difference from the old Puritanism. And some of the issues are different from the old Puritanism. Usually it's not so sexual, though it can be at times. But it's a new Puritanism, and it's pervading the culture.
The new Puritanism shifts. It'd be interesting to see the life cycle of a secular puritanical sin. How long does it last?
Exactly.
What finally kills it?
Exactly.
We move on to another defined sin.
Yep. And I suspect, one of the things I suspect that will kill this as a sin is when enough Hollywood types or other prominent individuals do it and make fun of it. Then it becomes neutralized, and then people say, well, okay, we'll go on to something else.
Mockery is the death phase, huh?
Right.
When you can mock something.
Yes.
Well, I will tell you, I left the church for 8 years. 8 or 9 years, I was out of the church. I didn't leave Christianity, although I got very confused. I didn't know what to believe. And I remember at one point with my wife in the kitchen, I was to the verge of tears. And the last time I was to the verge of tears was when the Cleveland Browns lost the playoffs on a draw play.
Yeah,
third and
they'll
12.
do it.
Yeah. And I said, I don't know what to believe anymore. How do I know? I belong to a church that says abortion's wrong, but contraception's not. Or I can't lose my salvation, but that church says I can. This one says you shouldn't get divorced, but if you do, we'll remarry you. I said, what? It's sand under my feet. And I was in spiritual crisis for a long time, and I think some of that spiritual crisis brought me back to the church, which essentially said, here is the foundation of truth. And then I thought, well, if that's the foundation of truth for religion, it's got to be the foundation of truth for psychology. They're not separate entities.
Exactly. Let's go to one more question from our studio audience. Ma'am, where are you from?
California.
Great. And what's your question?
How can we as parents and grandparents correct the psychological damage to our children and grandchildren?
The psychological damage to your own children or what you see happening with the grandkids?
Same. Grandkids and grandchildren.
The whole family. The whole family's messed up, yeah. There was a study done that basically said one stable adult in someone's life has a salutary effect, a healthy effect, far beyond what you'd expect. A coach, Cub Scout leader, CCD teacher, nun, Jesuit priest. A grandparent is in that role.
Yes.
I remember I used to have a prison ministry. When I was outside the church, they let me go into the jail with the guys. And one of the things the guys would tell me in Bible study was, well, I only went to church once, but I remember it. My aunt took me. Well, I remember my grandma used to have a rosary there. I used to see her with that rosary, and I didn't know what it was, but I saw it. And each of them had these little snapshot memories of this person in their lives. And a grandparent is ideally suited for that.
Yes.
But see, where grandparents get frustrated, grandparents are naturally saviors. They want to undo what they see happening. And I tell them, whoa. Your goal is not to undo it. Your goal is to just give the best influence you can. Let God work with that. Because what tends to happen is this, Father. If a grandparent is driven to correct it, gee, I raised my kids bad, and now look, they're raising their kids bad, and it's my fault. I can't believe this. How am I ever going to get into heaven? What tends to happen is makes a grandparent desperate.
Yes.
Makes them desperate, and they get pushy.
And they don't make wise decisions.
Yes.
Yep. That's one of those things that you have to pay close attention to. You want to be wise. And that's one of the things you look for from a grandparent is wisdom. That's
that and stuffed animals.
That stuffed animals.
Lots of stuffed animals. Candy. Yeah, candy.
I have 30 seconds left.
Yeah.
What do you do to choose a Christian counselor?
Call them, ask them, interview them. If any counselor will not talk to you when you call and say, how do you practice? What is your particular bent? Are you comfortable with Christian principles? If they won't answer those questions, move on.
Right.
Call them and ask them. They should be willing to say, no, I'm not comfortable with that. I don't do that. Or, yes, I do a lot of that.
Okay, good. Well, thank you. Thank you very much for
always
being here
a
with
joy.
us tonight. It's really great to have you here, and it's always very informative. And want to give you all a blessing on this Ash Wednesday. May Almighty God bless you and keep you and cause His face to shine upon you and lead you in all of your ways by His peace. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. You know, we can bring you Dr. Ray Guarendi as a guest on this program and also have him make his series, do radio, and so many other things because this network is brought to you by you. You make it possible for us to have these guests and these programs by keeping us in between your gas bill, your electric bill, and your cable bill. So don't forget us, you know, at these different times, and include us even in your Lenten fasting and stuff to pray for us so we can keep on growing closer to our Lord. God bless you and thank you.